everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Critique of the Week for Friday, July 16th. Thanks so much for joining me. Always a pleasure to stop and give a little critique of the week for about an hour every Friday afternoon. As always, the purpose of these critiques is to give some people that workshop experience. It's so valuable in writers groups and MFA programs. So please do leave your comments in the chat windows to let the poets know. I'll try to read as many and talk about as many as possible. But the whole point is to give that feedback from strangers that it's hard to get on your own. So leave as many comments as you would. Let's see. We have a very small crowd today. James Cicillo is here, though, and Sharon Ferrante, Nate Jacobs. Hello. It's good to see y'all. Over on, see some people trickling on YouTube, too. No one said hi yet, but that's okay. I see you there. Let's see. We're going to look at, with a new format, we're going to be looking at two poets. So the first half an hour, we'll be looking at Susan Talley. And then the second half an hour, we will be looking at two poems by Charlie Baylis. And it's a little bit different this time, so we'll see. We'll talk about that later when we get to Charlie's. But let's start with Susan Talley's right now. And let's see, let me go. Let's go to the poem. So there's two poems here by Susan Talley. Oops, I think I misspelled that. Let me double check. I think there's no E in Talley, right? I think I just wrote that out wrong. Let's see. Yeah, there's no E in Talley. I'm sorry. Let's first correction right there. It's just Tallyly. Okay, and so here's the first poem, Street Corner, I should say. Street Corner by Susan Talley. As I draw near, I see it through an imaginary movie camera, a way to arrange priorities and study disparity. Subsets of selfish people seem not to care about an unknown person. They choose to ignore the drama here, focused on the red traffic light. I watch them file into gourmet food aisles with their green plastic baskets. I need to gather something else. My mind's eye lands on an oversized umbrella. Underneath, the father and daughter huddle close. As I observe them talking, I count their blessings. He's a father totally absorbed in his daughter's face. She stands importantly by his side. My camera rests here. A stunning scene emotionally brings back the childhood game of password, and I am holding the special word, protected by a red cellophane window. And that was Street Corner by Susan Talley. And let's see. So Street Corner sort of sets the scene a little bit. We know where we are. As I draw near, I see it through an imaginary movie camera, a way to arrange priorities and study disparity. So I don't know. I'm imagining pulling up on the street corner, but I'm not sure. Like we have this the speaker here is observing the scene, but we really don't know where they're observing from, right? So as I see, as I draw near, and what? Like, it'd be nice to get a better sense of the speaker, I think, a little bit too. Subsets of selfish people seem not to care about an unknown person. And so I assume the unknown person is the speaker, the I here. They choose to ignore the drama here, focused on the red traffic lights. So we get this scene where all the cars are, waiting for the light to turn red. Everyone's just staring at the light, waiting. And nobody notices the speaker who is viewing the scene. And I think there's just a lot of opportunity here to describe more and really paint the scene here. We get the subsets of selfish people just waiting for the light. But there could be, ways to draw out that description and make it a lot more vivid, and add some more details about, the cars and I don't know, just describing that scene a little more clearly. So focus on the red traffic. So this whole thing, I think this scene could be painted in more detail. I think that's kind of missing and not drawing us into the poem as much as it could be. I mean, otherwise, there's nothing wrong with how the poem's operating so far. It works really well. It's just it's not taking advantage of everything it could, I think. They choose to ignore the drama here, focus on the red traffic light. I watch them file into gourmet foods aisles with their green plastic baskets. So here I was a little confused because first we have the people focus on the red traffic light, and so I assume they're in cars. And then they're gathering and going into gourmet food aisles with their baskets. So obviously they're not in cars, so it's different people. But it's written in a way that makes it seem like it's the same people, which is why like spending more time and to describe the scene would do a lot of good here, I think. Because then we wouldn't have that like, oh wait, you're talking about a different set of people here. If we like swept through and surveyed the whole scene and got like a really good picture of the whole sort of layout, I think we'd be sort of feel more connected to the poem that way. But I like the descriptions though. Like what we do get, I like. So I watched them file into gourmet foods aisles with their green plastic baskets. It's a really nice little detail. So I like that little detail there. I need to gather something else. So we're back into this gathering, studying priorities and disparity. My mind's eye lands on an oversized umbrella. I really like the sound of that line too. I think that's probably my favorite line for some reason in the poem. There's something about my mind's eye lands on an oversized umbrella. I think maybe it's the sort of the metaphor there of your eye landing. Like you imagine like your vision like actually bouncing off the top of the umbrella or something. And there's some way that the sounds and the music of that sentence really work well. So I like that. But then there's no punctuation. Notice here there's no punctuation. It's missing right there. And that tripped me a little bit as I was reading. My mind's eye lands on an oversized umbrella. So, I mean, it would be like a dash or a period would work there. Underneath, the father and daughter huddle close. As I observe them talking, I count their blessings. He is a father, totally absorbed in his daughter's face. And again, no punctuation here where it should be. So it's a little... like if the poem doesn't use punctuation regularly throughout, then it's not a problem. But other places, mostly it does use regular punctuation. So it just... you kind of notice and trip. Like you expect it to be there. And when you don't see punctuation that you're anticipating, it ends up like just tripping out of the poem, making you pay more attention to the punctuation than you should. So, pick one or the other. Either use punctuation or don't. Because I think this poem, the way the line breaks are arranged, the punctuation, you could, adjust slightly and make it so there's no punctuation at all. It could be one of those poems. Because each line is a pretty hard stop, right? So it works that way too. But pick one or the other. She stands impatiently by his side. My camera rests here, a stunning scene emotionally. So here is the whole, a stunning scene emotionally. This is the show don't tell stuff, right? Like if you have to tell me that it's stunning, that's because you don't think that I understand reading and how you described it, that it's stunning. And so that's just, it's not like you can't tell and you have to show all the time, but telling is a much weaker, much less connective way of expressing something in a poem or any kind of writing. And so, so anytime you see that you've written a line like this, I almost think about it as your subconscious telling you that you haven't described it well enough. So you're having to explain it to make us know that it's a stunning scene emotionally. But I do like the next. Brings back the childhood game of password, and I'm holding the special word, protected by a red cellophane window. And I really like this ending too. It took me a little bit to realize what the red cellophane window was. And I wonder if you capitalize the word password so we know we're talking about a board game, that would be easier. Is that, let me double check on this one, because I think I never played Password when I was a kid. But the way it's described, I assume it's a board game. And there's a little window that you look through. Yeah, here it is. So here's a classic Password. Right here. It's a classic game, Password, with a timer. And I assume there's some kind of like red window that reveals what the word is. Yeah, there's the red window. So that's what she's referring to in this little section of the poem. And I really like that. We talk a lot about a poem the way they have to have some kind of movement or some kind of trajectory or like plot arc, some kind of leap from one state to another. Because a poem really is transformative in that it changes the way you feel from the beginning to the end. It does a little bit of work like that. And this is the turn right here where the poet, the speaker, leaps from this scene with the father and daughter to going back to this childhood game of password and this special word protected by a cellophane window. And I don't know, it's an interesting connection. And it's a sort of a spontaneous leap into a memory that this brings back, which is always compelling, and it brings that sense of emotion too. So I really like this movement here from this one section. That's the turn in the poem there, and I think that works really well. The only thing that's missing is I think I'd like more description throughout the poem. We already mentioned like describing the scene right away, but we could describe the daughter and father more here too, and then get rid of the need for having a stunning scene emotionally as part of the poem. If we can just describe it more so that we feel it as stunning. So that's kind of my opinion about this poem. Let's see what the comments are. And now we're up to 20 people, so that's a regular-ish kind of crowd. Good to see y'all over here. Let's see. So Sharon Ferrante says, I think I would start with the father and daughter and then focus on the scene. And then Nate Jacobs said something similar. There's an odd sense of disconnect from the scene by the eye, seen through a camera at my mind's eye. Why the distance? Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's just a lot of opportunity here, the way the poem moves. Like I said, there's a lot more places you could describe more of the landscape surrounding the scene before you introduce it if you want to. You could just jump right in to the father and daughter, like Sharon Ferrante says, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to really pull us into a poem and have us feel that space before we get to the surprise turn of what it brings back. But I also feel like at the end here, like I love the turn, but I don't really get a sense of the secret. Like the game. It's a game of password. It's not just any game. It's a game of password where somebody is holding a secret. I don't really know how the game works, so I don't know how to interpret the meaning that's found here. Like the poet, the speaker, the writer found meaning in this scene through this connection to the past, right? But we don't really get enough of the explanation of password. Like, what is it about password? Why that game and not another game? And whose special word? Like, who has the secret here that's protected by the cellophane window? Is it the speaker, the witness, who is like the only one witnessing this scene and how emotionally stunning it is? Is that the secret? Like, the speaker has a secret to life, because she's noticing and paying attention, whereas everybody else up here is looking at the traffic lights and not paying attention to the the little dramas that are going on in life. Is that what it's talking about? Or is this special password between the father and daughter? And there's some kind of secret there that's protected, So I don't know which one it is. I don't know how to take away. I like the turn, and I feel its authenticity. But I'd like just more explanation of both. So I want more scene here at the top, and draw out and get more into this. What about it? Like, dig into that. What is it about the game of password that's like what? It says I am holding a special password. So I kind of assume the password is just the ability to witness. That's kind of my interpretation of the poem. But there's more to it, Do you feel like you could drill down into that? There's more like psychological weight there that's just not really explored. And maybe the key is the word protected too. Like why, what's so important about the protection? Like that's why it's the game of password. And from this distance, looking at the world, pretending it's through a movie camera's eye where you're not part of it, is a kind of protection, but like why? So this whole thing could be pushed more and drawn out, but it's a fascinating poem, and I think a really nice arc to it too. So Nate Jacob says, even that red cellophane window is the sort of separation between the eye and the scene. I'd play up this feeling of being out on the outside. Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Let's see. There are details here like the red traffic light. This is Mark Grenier, that could be made more of or be more obviously important. Is this intended to link to the red cellophane window at the end? Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I didn't notice that connection, but yeah, it's the red of the traffic light is the same as the red cellophane window. Mark A. Grenier says there's also a lot of distance between the scene and the poetic narrator, which, if closer, might be more interesting. Hege Jacobson Lepery says, I like how the poem moves in, exploring the zoom through a camera, but I think I need to understand how her own experience plays into the interpretation. I grant him. Yeah, more. That's just. I think it's like the roots of the poem are here, and it just could be expanded a lot, and then it ended up being more engaging. So I think just keep pushing yourself to describe and figure out what it is about the password in particular, and this distance, and the need for protection, and the need to have a secret, or a special word. Like the sense of distance is like the secret, but like why, Yeah. So Sharon Friday says, I don't understand the ending, though it is a cool poem with great potential. Nate Jacob says there is a red and green element. Complete the semaphore with a yellow part. That's interesting. Interesting suggestion. Over on Facebook, let's see, there's Sally Dunn and Judy Lorenzen. Good to see you. And Bewitching. Terry R. says, I like the surprise of counting someone else's blessings, especially someone the speaker apparently doesn't know. Yeah, I forgot. I meant to mention that. But this whole counting of the blessings thing is another thing you could expand on. Like what other blessings? Like we don't list them, we don't explain them, we don't explore them or itemize them or describe them, even though the speaker is counting the blessings, like what blessings? So that's another opportunity to expand. Like this poem could just be a much longer poem that digs more into the subject matter and in just more detail. And Terry R. says there may be a great connection between the red light and the cellophane window, but it's not clear yet. Yeah. So I think this, a lot of the poems that we go over don't have this sort of, they don't know the why they're being written. But this is, with this turn here, you can see what, it's not really clear, but there's something really there that makes the poem need to be written. Like there's something that's like pushing its way out with the poem. And so just expand on that and explore it more, I think is my opinion of this. Now let's look at the other poem by Sally Dunn. This is Origin. I mean, not Sally Dunn. Susan Talley, sorry. And that's Talley without an E. Origin. I was not asleep the night March winds colluded with the trees when their bare arms stretched against my windows. It was unintelligible language. What I remember most about spring is here with April's molecular reveal. These Martian green puffballs, riding in a sea of branches. The boughs nursemaids of the future. Before forsythias and daffodils make their announcements, leafy tweens will pop from these stems. One day I will take hold of the branch wrist to feel the pulse of what is yet to be. Interesting. So again here, Origin. There's not a lot to go on with this title. We don't really know. It doesn't really situate us or add anything. It seems to imply that it's leading you toward an interpretation of the poem, but I'm not sure that's fulfilled. But let's see. I was not asleep the night March winds colluded with the trees when their bare arms scratched against my window. I really like those opening first four lines. There's a really nice rhythm to that. A really nice description. You're sort of being drawn in a good way. Again, there's missing punctuation here, because that's some kind of stop. That needs to be some kind of, it could be a semicolon or it could be colon, or it could be a dash, or it could be a period, but there needs to be something there because other lines have punctuation where they're supposed to be punctuation. So so that needs to be fixed. And then also notice the capitalized letters to start lines are a little. Is that consistent either? I guess just a lot of lines start with a capital. I mean, with a beginning of a sentence. So it's another reason to assume that this should have been just a period there. It was unintelligible language. What I remember most about spring is here with April's molecular reveal. These Martian, I think, is that like supposed to be like we're saying Martian very slowly? That was my interpretation, but I'm not sure. Martian green puffballs. I'm not sure what is added by spreading it out like that. Riding in a sea of branches. I like riding in a sea of branches. So I like this line, but these, I think the molecular reveal is a little clunky, and the Martian is kind of too. Like it's just unnecessary. I don't know. Maybe somebody else has a better interpretation of that. Let's see. But Nate Jacobs here says, why the Martian breakup of the word? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, let's see over on Facebook. Does anybody have any ideas? Okay, so I don't know. So I'm not sure. If that's something that you're doing all the time, maybe you can get away with doing stuff like that. I don't think I've ever mentioned, but one of the things that just happens a lot, or that kind of thing where you'd be like draw out the ending, or like certain lines step by step, where it'd be like mar, she, and like that at the, like 3 separate lines in a poem. You see that a lot, and this is kind of a smaller version of that, where stuff are sort of being made dramatic just in the layout, and that doesn't work. That's kind of like show don't tell on steroids or something. Like that's like even more than just telling, is like sort of visually telling through the way the word's laid out. It really doesn't work very well usually. So maybe that's what was going on there. I'm not really sure. So I would just close that up and say Martian green puffballs. There should be a dash instead of a hyphen. It should be an M dash, which is the longest dash. Alt code 0151 on your keyboard. Writing in a sea of branches. The boughs, nursemaids of the future. Another great line. Every once in a while there's a great line in both these poems. Before forsythias and daffodils make their announcements. I like that, make their announcements. It's a good expression too, and it sounds nice. So a bunch of good lines, a little riff of really good lines there. Leafy tweens will pop from these stems. One day I will take hold of the branch wrist to feel the pulse of what is yet to be. So here, unlike the last poem, where I felt like this was a spontaneous turn, where we went back in time to the old game of password, and it felt like this came out of the subconscious, and it was the thing that was like itching at the poem the whole time, right? This last 2 lines to me feels sort of, I'm written and I haven't found why I'm really, this is the why question we always talk about. I feel like, I can sort of feel the poet getting to this part in the poem and then thinking, well, I haven't really figured out why I've written this poem, so I'll put on an artificial answer with these last 2 lines. One day I will take hold of the branch wrist to feel the pulse of what is yet to be. It's sort of a summarize-y kind of thing. It ties back into the origin title, but it feels just a little forced. It doesn't feel spontaneous, like the poem is singing itself, I don't think this poem has found its destination yet. And maybe that, maybe when that happens, usually it's the case that the poet or the poem took a wrong turn kind of and painted itself into a corner. So I always think of what would you do if you cut off the last 3 lines, say, and started back before, because this was the last line I liked, right? I like make their announcements. And again, I forgot to mention, but this is missing punctuation too. But these leafy tweens, and the like the register of the word tweens. It's a very informal type word, maybe becoming more formal these days, but it doesn't really feel like a fit with the rest of the poem either. And pop is a very casual type word too. So these words are a little bit off in the like lexicon of the poem, and they pop from these stems. So I feel like this is like the wrong turn. And so here, I would try to get to the announcements and push the poem in a different direction, because I don't feel like it's found where it wants to go yet. I was drawn in by the beginning, other than a couple little clunky things for no reason. I like the rest, so I really like the poem up to here. But then after announcements, there's something more to it than this. The idea that the future is coming is kind of the superficial, like artificial idea that's being applied here. But there's something more to it than that, I feel like. And so how could you, I would just start writing the poem and then just go somewhere different from after announcements. And maybe that's the way to get to what the poem's really about. Also this, look back at the beginning. So I was not asleep. This is sort of the key. There's something that was keeping the speaker up, right? When the March winds colluded with the trees and scratching against the window. And that feels like maybe that's what's not. That might be the place to go. There's something that was compelling the poem to be written. And maybe that had to do with it. Why was I not asleep? So maybe what you want is a turn here into answering that question of why I was not asleep. That could be the way to go. Maybe that's it. It's hard to, generate new content in the middle of a critique. But I would say that that's what to do is try to generate new stuff off of this, hinge off that, open some kind of new door. And it could be exploring why I was not asleep, before Forsythians and Daffodils make their announcements, that day, blah, blah, blah happened. And then you could go in that direction and then pull back into the origin stuff. That's the kind of thing that I would look for here. Let's see. Mark Grenier says, origin seems to be about the opening of leaves and the spring trees or some other kind of opening to the new. Nate Jacobs says, what this poem would benefit from is an extension of the announcement of spring coming life. Let the reader interact with it, nature's explosion that is spring. Sharon Friday says it seems to be about the growing of spring, just needs a better turn. There's just more to it than that, though. That's the one level without jumping to another level of consciousness or of impulse, the reason why something like this is compelling to us is because it has some kind of meaning that we're trying to get at the heart of. And that's where to look, that's where you should be looking for where the poem can go. It's just sort of solving that mystery of why it was being written in the first place. And let's see. James Cecilla says I was awake instead of I was not asleep. I mean, that would change it. But I think I don't know. I think that's fine. I don't know what that would really add, honestly. Nate Jacob says the switch between a personified nature and science fiction-y stuff is confusing to me. I vastly prefer the natural in this poem. Those lines are nice. Yeah, those are the best lines for sure. Is Martian? Let's see. So I didn't take that, even though it's Martian and it's spread out like that to sort of highlight it. I didn't take Martian to be actually science fiction-ish. I mean, the molecular is too science-y. Maybe that's what Nate Jacobs is getting at. The molecular. I mean, there's only one. I mean, not only is it a sort of a clunky construction, molecular reveal is a lot of syllables, and molecules don't really reveal themselves because you can't see them. And it's a very science sort of clinical type phrase. And so that feels off unless you want to dive into the molecular and then start talking about like cell biology or something, which could be a great way to go with it. But the problem is for me is it just doesn't continue itself. It's sort of out of place. And Martian green, is that a color though? That's kind of what I assumed. Let's see. What if you Google Martian green? I mean, it's an Astro Bright's color. So I don't know. I don't know if that's what it means or not, if it's referring to the actual color. But here's the actual. This is the color of Martian green, which we actually use Astro Bright's paper swatch for our end sheets in Rattle issues. But that's the color Martian green, and there's a little Martian guy. So I just took it as the color. Like there is that. I don't know what this tree is, but there's a tree in this farm that we go apple picking, and I don't know what it is. It has these little, really that color green, spiky balls. Maybe somebody who's watching knows what these are and can answer the mystery for me. But that's what I imagine is those. I don't know, whatever kind of tree that is has these really bright but light green spiky ball things. And that was the description with these Martian green puff balls I was imagining, like actual puff balls. But maybe only because I'd seen that kind of tree before. But anyway, so molecular, you could, after announcement, start talking about the molecular nature of daffodils and forsythias if you wanted to take that direction. But I think better to just cut that and stick with the natural type descriptions. Okay. So Sally Dunn mentioned something that I didn't notice, that the leap from March to April is too abrupt and it's unclear why the jump was made. And I didn't even notice that, actually. I was not asleep the night March winds colluded with the trees when their bare arms scratched. I like that. So what I remember most about spring is here with April's molecular reveal. Yeah, so we did jump a month forward, but I'm not sure why. Where are we even situated? Are we in March, awake at night in March, thinking about April and how these things are coming out then? I don't know. Terry R says, yes, I think turning to the personal would be a good idea. All of this action in nature being the origin of something stirring in the speaker. That's a good way to put it, yeah. Like something about this scene is stirring to the speaker, but we don't know what. And so turning to the personal, I think the question is why I was awake. But I don't know, we'll see. Terry R also said, I like the surprise of counting. Oh wait, no, that's the last one. Counting someone else's blessings. That was the other poem. Okay, let us, I don't know if we have anything else here to say about this one. So about this Martian, Janthi Rangan says, is it a play on the word March? Martian. Yeah, that's a good question. Is the word March, is the origin Mars? I don't know. Let's see. Marky Grinner says Osage oranges. Not sure. Osage oranges. For the kind of tree. Maybe they're mimosa trees. The puff, that's Lisa Romero. Fuente says maybe they're mimosa trees. The puffballs are green and bright pink, though. Actually, we have a mimosa tree in our front yard, and those are puffy. These are like actually spiky, whatever that kind of tree is. Maybe they're Osage oranges. Yeah, let's see. Anyway, let's move on to the next poem. I think we kind of have these two poems settled on. So this one, we really love the arc of it, and we just like more detail and sort of draw out the meaning a little bit more, just with more description, because it's working pretty well though as a poem goes. And then Origin, I just think it's not complete. I think we want to push it in a different direction. I think this was a wrong turn, and sort of ended up in the wrong place, and then ended up having to put on an artificial ending where instead of the poem wanted to push in a different direction. Which I think maybe is the turn to the personal. Both these poems are kind of distant from the personal. Like the I is here in both the poems as I draw near, but we don't get much insight into the I. there's a distance, and maybe that's what needs to be explored, is why there's a distance. But anyway, those are the 2 poems from Susan Talley. Thanks so much for sharing them, Susan. And Susan is here, I saw on the Facebook. And Kashiana Singh is here too. She said, I'm so delighted to be back listening. Yeah, have been away for personal things, but looking at a personal life poem unfolding. Interesting. Okay, so let's look at the second poet. This is Charlie Baylis. And this is kind of interesting because Charlie Baylis is the editor of Anthropocene right here. So we're going to be critiquing the poems of an editor, kind of turning the tables. This is Anthropocene, the literary magazine that Charlie edits. But then also interesting is if you look at his bio here, his most recent publication is Santa Lucia from Invisible Hand Press. He's from Nottingham, England, etc. But so it looks like these poems, which he sent a while ago, maybe like 6 months ago, are in a book now, I think, because both these poems mention Santa Lucia. So they're probably in this book from Invisible Hands Press. So it's a little strange critiquing poems that are already published. But let's see. Let's see what it goes and what we have to say. And maybe you'll just want to buy the book after reading them. We'll figure it out. Here we go. But this is Charlie Baylis's poem, The Museum on the Edge of Santa Lucia, for Julia. Oops. Drop my cap. The Museum on the Edge of Santa Lucia, for Julia. The Elvis impersonator, wearing a t-shirt which says, I heart my wife, watching his watch, reading a brief history of time, while John Ashbery writes of entropy, polar bears with their bluest eyes play in the snows of Antarctica. Beached seals hypnotized of global warming. The police lend me novels which drive me mad. The police lend me novels about romance. Hush. My novels are classified. My novel begins. Julie is beautiful. She works in a museum on the edge of Santa Lucia. I met her on the pier where the orcas leap over our heads in beautiful conspiracies, convex mirrors flipped vertical. My novel ends. I am sorry for my moments of madness. I am sorry for the hurt I caused while ironing spoons. We must love ourselves, most of all in the dark moments, when we need love the most. The police litter the pier with fashionable novels. The police are tiresome. The police are contrary color and extravagant belts of blue, while John Ashbery writes about the coastline swaying from his necklace. A million butterflies launched in the white and pink clouds before they were white and pink clouds. And that is The Museum on the Edge of Santa Lucia, for Julia. And so, I mean, you can see the really rich detail in this poem. Every time I see a poem with no capitals, I think it's kind of just internally... I assume it's not going to be that great, honestly, because a lot of very amateur type poems don't capitalize anything. It's sort of something that young poets tend to do. But you never know. And it turned out this poem is a very rich, detailed poem and not very amateurish at all. So it sort of throws you off a little bit. The Elvis impersonator wearing a t-shirt says, I heart my wife, watching his watch, reading a brief history of time. So we get all these details. And notice how the details just draw you in to the poem, right? You sort of get lost immediately because it's so rich with very specific, concrete details, even though you don't know exactly what's going on. Even though you don't know exactly what's going on, just having a lot of detail that you can sort of, like your mind's eye can leap from one detail to another. And if you can see it clearly, you're pulled into the scene in the poem really strongly, even if you don't know what's quite going on. It gives you a lot more freedom, is what detail does. And so that's working here. While John Ashbery writes of entropy, polar bears with the bluest eyes. See, it's not just polar bears, but polar bears with the bluest eyes play in the snows of Antarctica. And then it's the great music in that line, too. Beach seals hypnotized of global warming. The police lend me novels which drive me mad. The police lend me novels about romance. Hush. So for the first time here, I'm starting to get a little bit lost. Starting to get lost is my little comment. Like I don't know, the police lend me novels, which drive me mad, is a little too abstract for me to follow. I mean, I'm still kind of going along with it, but I'm only sort of going through the motions of being connected at this point. The police lend me novels about romance. Hush, my novels are classified. My novel begins, Julia is beautiful. She works, I like this my novel begins sort of construct. I think that works. Julie's beautiful. She works in a museum on the edge of Santa Lucia. I meet her on the pier where the orcas leap over our heads in beautiful conspiracies. I like that, beautiful conspiracies of leaping orcas. Really interesting description. Convex mirrors flip vertical. Then we get that line, which I don't really get. So there are a couple lines that just maybe go a little too far into obscurity. My novel ends. I'm sorry for my moments of madness. I'm sorry for the hurt I caused while ironing my spoons. Again, a really interesting detail that pulls us into the poem. We must love ourselves most of all in the dark moments when we need love the most. The police litter the pier with fashionable novels. The police are tiresome. The police are contrary color and extravagant belts of blue. I love that phrase, extravagant belts of blue. That's good stuff. But it's interesting because we already got the police up here. And here we get the police 3 more times. And it's interesting because we get to this word tiresome. And I'm kind of getting tiresome of that construction at that point too, which is kind of an interesting thing to pop up. But then we get to the contrary color and extravagant belts of blue, which I really like. While John Ashbery writes about the coastline swaying from his necklace, kind of another very abstract, surreal kind of image there, but it works. A million butterflies launched into white-pink clouds before they were white-pink clouds. And it's interesting lines at the end, too. So the poem is just full of interesting stuff. I'm not quite sure what to make of it. It's one of those poems, to me, I would feel like as an editor, I would think, I wonder if the book is really good, but it's hard to get a lot out of it as an individual poem. Like it's sort of like, what do I learn from this? Or what do I take home? What's memorable about it? And what's it even talking about? Like, why was it written? That stuff isn't really clear, but it could be in the context of the series of poems that are the book. So poems like these, I read and I'm entertained as I go through. And then to me personally, I think, so what? Why did I have to read that? Like, what do I get out of it? And I'm not really sure. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it, but it is a good, well-written poem and it was engaging. So it's one of those ones sometimes, occasionally we'll publish poems that have that feeling if it's like a strong enough, if it's a strong enough journey, you don't have to know where you went to enjoy it. But it's a tough line to walk. Let me see what people are saying about this. Nate Jacobs says, all the scene shifts leave me on the outside looking in. I like all the scenes individually, but I can't connect to them within the poem. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. What are the novels from the police? It says Sharon Ferrante. The police should be explained once. It is a very personal poem meant to this is Nate Jacobs now. Is it a very personal poem meant especially for Julia? An inside joke of sorts? If so, I want in on the details behind it. Kelly McQuain says it's a little non sequitur-ish at times. Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. Mark A. Grenier says the contrast between the Julia lines and the other more surreal lines is interesting, although I don't know what to make of it either. I like the butterflies at the end. I do too. Just the description and details are really fun and interesting and engaging. Maybe, but we're not really allowed to access what's really going on in the poem, which is the problem. To correct something like this, maybe you could make the title instead of just saying the museum at the edge of Santa Lucia, which we kind of get already. We get this scene, and I'm sort of imagining that kind of environment anyway without the title. So maybe the title can say something about what the poem is doing and just give us some kind of like key to access the rest of it. That's one thing that maybe it could do. Or maybe it's just the kind of poem that only works in the context of the book. Hege Anita Jacobson Lepre says, I'm completely pulled in by the constant twists of metaphor. Yeah, it does pull you in. It's very engaging writing. And it's very European, too. I mean, the shifts and juxtapositions and non sequiturs, or sort of a contemporary style that's very popular in Europe. Let's see. To make it says visually stunning details in Santa Lucia. James Asilo loves ironing spoons. I love that too. Okay, let me look over at Facebook. So Terry says something about Ashbery's self-portrait in a convex mirror. Yeah, maybe that's the thing. Let's see. So Terry R says something about Ashbery's self-portrait in a convex mirror, and wasn't that inspired by a painting, which would be in a museum? It could be. I mean, that could be the detail that, like how this relates to Ashbery, is maybe the thing that could be in the title that explains it. Because I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure I'm just not sure how to put it all together into a way that I remember and want to come back to, even though it was a fun journey at the time. So I'm just looking for some context for this. But it's good writing throughout. I really enjoyed it. I think the only thing I wasn't really a fan of, line for line, there were a couple little lines, and then the repetition of the police just felt a little forced, and I didn't really understand why. So I don't know. Let's look at the other one, because we'll see how this goes. This is Tropical Storm. Again, we're going to talk about Santa Lucia, so I assume it's from the same book. Tropical Storm, and again, this is Charlie Baylis' poem. Summer rain pours over Santa Lucia. The lizard's tail twitches on the rocks. Santa Lucia wrapped in nuclear breeze. I heard there was a prophet of nothing. Nothing of the butterflies, nothing of the racetracks, the nothing box filled by nothing. You can die in an elevator. You can put almost anything into a hat. The hat's emptiness goes on forever. You don't need to write the last line. That's very interesting. Again, we have the same sense of just excellent details and the same sense of movement without really knowing where we're going. Tropical Storm is the title. And that's sort of the start of the poem starts there with a rain. I don't know. I like this one because this is so short and condensed. I feel like it works better as a poem on its own than the last one about the museum and the police and things. It's sort of there, the jumping between twists and different things. It's hard to keep it up that long without having enough context to connect to. But with this one, it's short enough that I never get that sense of like I'm getting tired of not knowing where I am. So summer rain pours over Santa Lucia. The lizard's tail twitches on the rocks. Just great details, like that. Santa Lucia wrapped in nuclear breeze. I love nuclear breeze. Just so many great phrases in both these two poems. I heard there was a prophet of nothing. Nothing of the butterflies. Nothing of the racetracks. The nothing box filled by nothing. I like that line a lot too. The nothing box filled by nothing. You can die in an elevator. That's a surprising turn, but it works. Very startling kind of line. You can put almost anything into a hat. I love that line too. The hat's emptiness goes on forever. You don't need to write the last line. And I like that too. So this one, I kind of just like the whole thing. Again, I don't know what to take from it. It's this kind of thing where if I were reading the book, maybe the book would have some kind of context that we could make sense of it. I don't know. I don't really have much to say about this one. I like it, and I think at this length, the mystery works fine. I mean, what do you guys think about it? Kelly McQuinn says Tropical Storm has great images. The last line is perfectly ironic. Love it. James Asilo says you can put anything in a hat. Is so unexpected. I like that. Yeah, it's the surprise is what really works. The nothing box filled. This is Mark Grinier. The nothing box filled with nothing is at the point. The eye of a storm. It's interesting. Yeah, I didn't really think of it that way, but that really works. As the eye of the storm. That's interesting. Everything is just so strange and surprising here that I think it really works. Sharon Fronte though says the ending I would make stronger. I wonder what you could do that would be stronger. I don't know. I'm kind of feeling this one of those where I just kind of like it. I don't really have much to say or critique about it. There's really nothing that stands out that I wouldn't change. It's a good example too of the way you can write a poem with no punctuation, because nothing feels awkward about the lack of punctuation. It just works fine because most of them are end stops, and when it's not, it's like a soft stop anyway, and it fits with the rhythm. So I think this poem just works. I think it's a good one. Don't really have anything to say about it, but maybe check it out in the book from Invisible Hands Press. Here's Charlie Baylis's book from Invisible Hand Press, Santa Lucia right here, by Charlie Baylis. So, I'll read this for you. I might as well, but just use this as like an advertisement. Santa Lucia is the new pamphlet from poet Charlie Baylis that immerses the reader in a contrasting world of light and dark, in a place where optimism, anxiety, fear, and love collide. Split into 2 parts, Day sees the poems rise into the light using propulsive, enigmatically lyrical style. You could see that in these poems. The second part, Night, explores the poet's relationships with others and how they navigate areas of love and loss and what it means to find intrinsic identity in a place far from home. Santa Lucia is a powerful collection of poems that is rewarding as it is absorbing. And that was just published a couple weeks ago. $6, so it must be short, 25 pages, so it's a chapbook. Oh, and here's a sample, Tropical Storm. This is interesting. So, in the time since, and I didn't plant this, I had no idea, but in the time since, Charlie has edited this poem. So this was an earlier version we're looking at here. You don't need to write the last line. Let's read the new version, and this is what was actually published. Tropical Storm. Summer rain lashes Santa Lucia. The chameleon twitches on the cross. In the harbor wrapped in nuclear breeze, a trombone plays La Belle Dame Sans Merci. A prophet speaks under the peace of leaves. Liberated canaries spreading panoramic green. From a purple pot of tea he pours a cup of purple tea. He declines in a deck chair, hands me an emptiness that goes on forever. That's interesting. Very different. Maybe there's multiple poems called Tropical Storm in here. The beginning is the same. We get the nuclear breeze. But otherwise, it's completely different, which is interesting to see. I find myself missing the nothing in the hat, and things like that. He hands me an emptiness that goes on forever. I like the other poem better, personally. I like the you. Look at how the you enters, like talking, bringing in you all of a sudden feels like a turn in the poem here. And with the newer poem, it's a he, and it stays sort of distant instead of speaking to us all of a sudden. From a purple pot of tea, he pours a cup of purple tea. I like that line on its own. He declines in a deck chair, hands me an emptiness that goes on forever. Interesting to look at these two. Anyway, that is all from this book by Charlie Baylis, Santa Lucia. And that is going to be it, I think, unless, let me see if there's any other comments before we go. So Hege Anita Jacobson Lepre says, I love the mixture of weirdness and surprising language twists. Sharon Friendly says, I write with no punctuation too. Mark Grenier says, he has a very strong sense of line. Each line has its own solidity and presence. Good way to put it too. Hege says, I feel whispers of surrealism. Actually very cool poem, says Sharon Ferrante. Rewrite was awesome, great, better. So people like the rewrite better, huh? I love the juxtaposition of the old and new version. I like the end better, says Sharon Ferrante. Declines in a deck chair is a great line. Interesting. So sounds like it was a good revision. People are liking it. Let's see. A Prophet of Nothing, says Terry R. Yeah. Interesting. So these are just two interesting poems. Maybe it just comes down to personal taste, where I like Tropical Storm better than The Museum on the Edge of Santa Lucia. I wonder if that's been revised too in the book since it came out. But anyway, those are two poems by Charlie Baylis. Then we had two poems by Susan Talley too. Both poems by Susan Talley show a lot of potential, and that was the main thing, to just keep pushing a little bit more and expand a little more. But they're both interesting poems too. So thanks for everybody for sharing these 4 poems today. And before we go, let me just remind you that that this week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Ace Bodges. Ace has been published in Rattle a whole bunch of times, maybe like 7 or 8 times in the last 20 years, dating back to like issue number maybe 17 or so. His most recent book is Escape Envy. He spent, I think it was 5 years in prison, and he writes, his most recent books are all about that experience, and Escape Envy is one of those poems. It was actually a Poets Respond poem that is the title poem to this book, Escape Envy. It was a story about prisoners who escaped from prison. I can't remember the details, but we'll figure that out talking about that. But he was talking about how in prison you sort of fantasize about those things. And but that'll be Ace Bodges. Should be a very interesting episode of the Rattlecast this Sunday. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem about an argument that you often have. Here's the actual wording. Write a poem that explores a common argument you have with yourself or someone else. So that is next week's prompt and next week's guest, Ace Bodges, Sunday, July 18th. That's this Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. As always, we'll start out with Poets Respond Live a little bit, then we'll go to Ace, then we will have an open line. So enjoy. See you then. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you Sunday. Goodbye.